and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We are your two hosts. I'm Tucker.
And I'm Alex. Today we will be making a drinking game for Don't Breathe 2. Don't Breathe 2 is directed by Rodo, Sayagues, who wrote the first movie. Weirdly enough, Fede Alvarez, the director of the first movie, is one of the writers this time around with Sayagues. This created a complete position switch between Sayagues and Alvarez this time around, as they are now in charge of the other person's position.
In Don't Breathe 2, we see that the blind man finally has a daughter. He starts to give her lessons on survival, but this and homeschooling is not enough for her as she wants to go to school and make real friends of her own age.
You need to pass all your tests.
She then gets a chance to go to the city, but this comes at a price as she is followed back by a pack of goons, and they try to abduct her. The blind man has to once again defend his home and his new daughter, while his daughter Phoenix is not even sure who she can trust.
Since this is a relatively new movie, we will try to be avoiding spoilers as much as possible. However, this does not mean we will completely be avoiding them, as some spoilers require discussion in our video. We will always recommend that you check out the movie before watching the video.
If you haven't seen it yet and you are allowed to drink at your local theater, we recommend that you memorize our drinking rules posted on screen now, head to the theater, and come back after you finish the movie. With that out of the way, let's move on to our in-depth look of the rules.
The first rule we will have for each drinking game is death. If you happen to see somebody pass on screen, you take a drink for it.
The next rule that we will always have here on Cheers to Fears is that if you hear somebody scream, cry, or yell, go ahead and take a sip. As you may have noticed for the previous rule, we generally post numbers for each rule, but we do not do so with new movies, so that is something you will have to figure out on your own.
Let's move on to the rules that are returning from the first movie. One rule that is returning is that if you see a gunshot, you take a sip. We feel like there were significantly less gunshots in this movie compared to the previous one, but there was more of an emphasis on hand-to-hand combat in this installment of Don't Breathe.
Another returning rule is that if you witness the blind man using another sense to help him, take a sip, my friend. For this rule, we witness the blind man using senses such as hearing or touch throughout the movie.
You're gonna see what I see.
We have one more rule from the last Don't Breathe movie that will be returning to this one for the rules. If you see a dog, you must take a sip. It is worth mentioning, however, that we did end up tweaking this rule a bit because there is one more dog in this movie than the last one.
Now, we will move on to the brand new rules that we have for Don't Breathe 2. The first rule of this batch is that if you hear someone singing the lullaby from Phoenix's childhood, take a drink.
Speaking of Phoenix, this next rule involves her as well. If you see her disobeying authority, such as the blind man, you are required by this rule to take a sip.
The next rule, you could say, also relates to Phoenix, but it is not directly about her. If somebody mentions Phoenix's mother, go ahead and take a sip.
Her mom, was she beautiful?
She was smart like you.
Let's move on to the ninth rule for our drinking game. This rule is that if you catch somebody being selfish in any way, you must take a sip. This rule will make you hate several of the characters throughout the film, so just be wary of that.
For our last rule, you must take a sip if you see either water or fire. These two elements are frequently used in the film, and they are pretty easy to catch.
Again, we did not add the final count for these rules, as the movie is still in theaters, and we did not feel like going to the movie theater with a notepad and pen.
So I guess it's worth mentioning that we didn't see this movie together in theaters. We actually went at 2 different times. It just worked out that way. It wasn't intentional, but Alex, you actually made the rules before I even went to see it, and I knew what the rules were before going in to see it. So I was kind of taking a bit of a mental note on how many drinks were happening, and it wasn't all that frequent, so I think it's probably going to be about the same challenge as the first one, so it'll be a relatively easy drinking game, I feel like.
Yeah.
Maybe like 3.5 drinks in the end is my guess. But take that with a grain of salt. I obviously wasn't counting in the theater. But that's just the feeling that I got as I was watching it.
So I guess the main thing to point out for the story, first of all, there was so many plot holes in it.
Yeah. It's also worth mentioning that I was the only one in the theater when I went. So as I was seeing these plot holes unfold, I was also texting you about like, so is this just how the movie is, or are they gonna come back around and talk about this? And lo and behold, they don't.
Most of the answer was just like no.
Yeah, pretty much. Like you didn't spoil anything for me, you let me find it out on my own, but yeah, there was a lot of plot holes and yeah, to say the least.
I guess the other thing to mention is they did not need to make a second installment. I feel like this is gonna be the epitome of this video right here. Making a second installment is absolutely pointless.
Yep.
At least for this installment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. It wasn't necessary at all. And the only returning character is the blind man, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have him returning. But like, I don't know, the story was completely new. It took place 8 years later, and it just really didn't need to happen.
Not at all. So the way that plot holes work is sometimes they're good in the sense that it can keep the story going forward without it destroying the story. One example of this is in Us. I feel like Us has a lot of plot holes in it, but like it keeps you so engaged throughout it that you don't really question it till the movie's over. Mm-hmm. And by that point you just enjoyed it enough, but at the end you're like, huh? But I don't know. If you don't know a lot, sometimes it's good in a sense.
Yeah, it can be.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, so this one, there was so many all over the place, and a lot of the movie wasn't great. So it just made you keep questioning everything, and it started piling up until you realized that this movie's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, well, and once you notice one thing, maybe it's just a little thing, then you start to kind of look for things that are out of place, and you notice so many more, and maybe you start nitpicking, and maybe a lot of this is nitpicking, but it's just the way that it works when the movie's not engaging you good enough, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess on the topic of plot holes, there were also a lot of plot conveniences in this movie. The main problem with that is, I guess it's fine if it serves a story in a sense, but for this movie it almost comes to a point where it basically destroys the movie.
Oh yeah, because like it's fine to have a few crutches in there to just kind of explain the story and push the story forward, but when every scene in the movie needs a plot convenience to make the story work, it's just like, it makes you want to facepalm.
Then it's basic. Then at that point, it basically becomes a children's fantasy story,
Like, exactly.
which I feel is like really bad for a movie that they're trying to call realistic.
Yeah, it's just
a realistic horror movie. I don't think should have like that many plot holes or plot conveniences in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's just name a few here. To start, I guess there was the dog that knew exactly where the crack house was. Despite him wanting to kill the man literally 2 minutes before, he's fine with him and leads him exactly to where he has to go.
Yeah, that dog, I mean, it's not completely out of question if a dog knows where its house is. Obviously, they can find home, but for some perfect stranger that they don't know, they're not going to be that obedient for.
Also some perfect stranger that he was literally just trying to kill 5 minutes prior.
Yeah, well, you could argue that, that guy saved the dog's life, so...
Yeah, I guess.
Another huge plot convenience in this one is he's able to find the breaker box or whatever, and he shuts the power off to the building. And he did this in the first one, which you could explain because it's his own house, it's his basement,
exactly.
He knows where his stuff is. But when it's in some random house that he's never been to before, how does he find it just like that?
Yeah, it's in like a hotel or like in
yeah.
a school building or something like that, and he just magically finds it.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't even search him like patting around on the walls trying to find it. It's just immediately
cut down.
So it's a little bit ridiculous. I know they don't want to waste time having him search around trying to find a switch, but at the same time, you can't just have some blind man finding things that even a person with perfect eyesight would have trouble finding that quickly.
Yeah. Another plot convenience is how the father had silver hair, and that automatically means that, hey, I'm your father.
Well, they were trying to play it off like, oh, he has silver hair, so Phoenix was born with silver hair, therefore you're his daughter. And like, it's a little bit far-fetched, to be honest, and they're not going to both have perfectly the exact same strand of hair being silver. And yeah, like, if they wanted to explain how he was Phoenix's real father, they could have just used the lullaby that they were using in the beginning of the movie. Like, he could have sang her that lullaby and she would have recognized it because it's from her childhood, and it's played throughout the whole movie, and it would have been a much more revealing or much more effective way to reveal that, because it would have been a little bit more subtle rather than just, oh, here, we have the same hair.
Yeah, it's not even that, it's just that hair can be colored.
Well, yeah, that too. So this is an example of a plot convenience that they could have used to push the story forward, and nobody would have questioned it. But because we've seen so many before this scene, we noticed it, and on top of all the other conveniences they used, it's just kind of one more thing that to add to the list. So they had a surgeon on hand, and sure, you can find a dirty surgeon that you can pay off to do some illegal stuff for you if you pay them enough, obviously. But like I said, just because of all the other conveniences that have been used, this is just one more to add on to it.
Yeah, and they tried to play it off before on the TV where there was an organ harvester at large and you saw him in the building. Even when I saw like the TV ad or the TV announcement, like look out for this guy, I was like, oh, he's coming back later, isn't he? So one other thing that was really irritating is Phoenix went to the burned down house to see her mother or like visit her grave or whatever you call it, memorial.
Yeah.
She happened to be there at the exact same time that her father happened to be there as well.
Yeah, it's a little unrealistic, little far-fetched, just like everything else on this list.
Yeah, and she also happened to be the only person that could cure the other person. I don't want to get too far into spoilers,
Yeah.
but she happened to be the only person in the world that they're able to find to help.
Yeah, sure is a lot of coincidences in this movie.
Yeah. Speaking of coincidences with Phoenix, thank God she was just lying in the middle of the road where a blind man was able to find her.
Yeah, well, why is a blind man walking down the middle of the road, first of all? And not, like, it just puts into question, where is Phoenix's mom and dad? We do eventually learn where Phoenix's dad ended up. I won't go into any detail. It's not really a spoiler, but I won't go into it. And they don't even explain what happened to her mom.
Yeah,
Like,
really.
why was Phoenix just left alone? Did
Yeah.
her mom die? Did her mom just abandon her?
Did
Like,
they just not fucking give a shit? It
Yeah,
seemed
like-
like they didn't give a shit.
apparently, if she's just in the middle of the road, passed out, like, I don't know. They didn't explain it, and yeah, it was just a random scene kind of thrown in there.
Yeah,
at
there
the
was
beginning.
no Amber Alert or anything.
No, nothing. So I guess now we'll go into a little bit of the scenes that we saw. One scene I wanted to talk about was the super glue scene, I guess. It's the first time we really saw one of the goons get hurt, I guess. And all we saw was the super glue over his mouth, which we see in the trailers, so I'm not spoiling anything. And we don't see it happen. We see a bit of the aftermath, I guess, but like it just kind of flashes. Like everything you see in the trailer is what you see in the movie.
And that's all the good scenes too, pretty much, I'd like to point out.
Well, yeah, all the good scenes are in the trailer, so
Yeah.
if you want to be left up to surprise, don't watch the trailer, which I guess if you're at this point in the video, it's too late for you, but yeah, they kind of just rushed that scene. I wish they would have let it play out, let it linger a bit. It would have been a lot more hard-hitting if they would have shown it being done, show the agony the guy was in, and yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say for that scene.
Yeah, I guess there's one more scene that I should mention, is the one where he's just laying down in the water, and then one of them touches the water, he feels the ripple effect,
Yeah.
and then shoots all three people. Like he just has fucking echolocation, and managed to gun down like 3 or 4 people.
3 out of the 4 people, and the one person that he managed to
Not shoot down.
yeah, not shoot down, ended up helping him in a sense. So like that's another convenience that we forgot to mention.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
Again, in the trailer.
yeah, it's in the trailer. Everything's in the trailer.
And I feel like that was such an effective scene too, but then again, it's like having a good horror movie, but then having all your good jump scares in the trailer. Just watch the trailer, don't watch the movie, right?
Yep. And one more scene that comes to mind now that we're talking about it is the one where he throws the hammer at the guy. That I feel like could have been the coolest scene if they just A, left it out of the trailer, and B, showed everything again.
Yeah.
Like the way that it cuts away after he throws the hammer, it does that in the exact same way in the movie.
Yeah.
We don't see the hammer hit the guy's head. We don't see him actually, like, you know, dead or whatever from the hit. We just see that throw, and it's implied obviously that it hit him in the head. But why don't we see it? They're just trying to go for that 14A rating, I guess.
Yeah. So many problems. Another problem that I really have is, I guess we'll get on to characters now. So I love the idea of Phoenix.
Yeah.
Phoenix is a girl that's been trained, just kind of like Erin from You're Next.
Yeah.
She's been trained how to defend herself, all these survivalist skills.
Yeah.
And she's basically relegated to a role such as Princess Peach. She's just the damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And it's like built up to her being like a badass, but that never happens.
Well, yeah, exactly. They have these two, both sides fighting for her are not good people, but she doesn't really, there is a couple scenes where she helps one side rather than the other, but like, overall, it doesn't really show her own survivalist techniques.
Exactly.
That's the problem. Like, clearly, the blind man trains her very well, and we see that in the trailer too, that he's been training her how to do these survivalist techniques.
Yeah.
And he does a good job, I'll admit, but at the same time, we don't get to see her using them to the full extent that we should have saw.
Yeah.
Because she was the only likable, one of two maybe,
Yeah.
likable characters.
It would have been great if she was in a couple of scenes where she was able to stun somebody and like run away. I mean, she was great at one thing, and that was hiding.
Yeah.
But she did that really effectively, and that's as good as we saw, which I hate. When you think of a badass, the one thing you don't want to think of is hiding.
Yeah,
And that's basically all she does. Despite her doing a very good job of it, that doesn't mean I want to see that and only that. I want to see her do something, like defend herself.
Yeah.
Put those survival trainings to the test, and I never see that in the entire movie.
No. And I guess in a sense you could call her the final girl, but throughout the whole movie, she doesn't show any characteristics of a final girl. And she was the final girl, so like, it's...
Yeah.
The idea of a child being a final girl is kind of a good idea, let's be honest. But to have her just not doing anything for the most part, there's a couple scenes where she does, sure. But for the most part, she's hiding, like you said, and that's not a final girl tactic.
Kevin McAllister did a lot better at defending himself from home invaders than this little girl did.
Yeah, he was a better final girl. Anyways, we'll move on to the blind man. In this movie, we did get to see, a more sensitive side to him. We saw a sliver of humanity when he ends up not killing the dog and ultimately rescuing the dog in the one scene. He raised Phoenix. We saw that he has a super protective side based on how he raised Phoenix and raising her up with those survivalist techniques. I do want to point out, though, they did too much work to try and make the blind man a good guy and tried to make him look like he redeemed himself after the first one. The first one we learned that he's such a bad person. He's a monster. Like, he's killing people, he's raping people, you know, he's going through he's doing all these crimes, and clearly he's just a monster.
Yeah.
It's not me you need to be scared of, little girl, but the man standing next to you.
And then in this one, they kind of try to make that monster into more of a human being and trying to give him compassion and all that. And I felt like it was just, I don't know, it wasn't the way to go about it. I didn't think so.
Yeah. I guess one other thing that I do want to add is that he, in a way, was a good father because he cared for her. He cared so much that he didn't want to let her out and like kind of live her own life. At the same time, it's a bit of kind of being a bad person. But I mean, from what he went through with his first daughter, he just didn't want to lose Phoenix. So he didn't want to lose his daughter again. I can understand that. Yeah. But at the same time, just still so unlikable. We can't really forget the actions of the past movie.
Yeah, or even this movie, how he ended up with Phoenix as the daughter.
Just stole a kid straight from the streets. And then they really tried to hammer down the point of you disliking the dad. So for the point of trying to burn down the dog in the house, and I don't know, there was just so many poor things that he did. I just hated him straight from the start. Even though that I knew he was kind of there to save his daughter or whatever, I still hated him so much.
Yeah.
Just him and his goons methed out Helena Bonham Carter, fucking all of them, except for the one guy who's just kind of like, this isn't right to be doing this to the child.
Yeah.
Other than that, all the goons were just awful. I knew you called them
Joker goons.
Joker goons, yeah, because they all had the ridiculous haircuts.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, that's the first thing that came to my head was Joker goons, and that's what I referred to them every time I brought them up was, yeah, the Joker goons. I hated them. I hated them as characters. They didn't have any backstory. The only backstory we got was from the father, and that was the only bit of information we got about him.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about the other guys. What are they there for? Obviously they're there as backup to the father or whatever, but like, why?
They served almost no purpose.
Pretty much. Another plot convenience, you might say?
Yes.
So I guess I mentioned how Phoenix was maybe one of two likable characters. The only other one being Hernandez, which, spoiler alert, I guess, has a very brief screen time. She kind of dies too early. Literally everything you see in the trailers involving Hernandez is what you see in the movie, except for the fact that she's dead. But you even see in the trailer the jump scare of the guy jumping out of the van behind her. So you can kind of put two and two together and see how this person is gonna die in the end. But that's just it. You kind of expect that it might be closer to the end, maybe the middle. It might be a high tense situation, but realistically, like you see in the trailers, she's blocked by their truck in the middle of the road. She gets out to try and tell them to move, and she goes back to her vehicle, and bam, that's it.
Even I can fucking call that.
Well, exactly.
I was just like in the theaters, like, there's somebody getting in that truck since she got out. Not a fucking chance somebody's not doing that.
Well, exactly. I hated that she died, and that was one thing I sent you a text about is, okay, so she just died. Now what? That's it? That's all her character was? We don't even know who she was. Why was she there in the first place? Like, we know nothing about what she was there for.
And like, she could have been used to fill a lot of these plot holes or plot conveniences. So like, such as, oh, I'm the one that led you to the house, so you find the blind man and the daughter. And oh, I'm the one that helps you find the power to turn off the power to the building, or electricity to the building. And they just kill her off, so none of that happens. They could have just like tied her up in the back of a van or some shit.
Yeah, like,
but instead they kill her. I don't know. And instead we're gonna use a dog to find your way back.
Well,
thank God the dog knows where the fucking power switch is.
Well, yeah, this is just another plot convenience, I guess I want to add, that the main purpose for Hernandez was so that the goons could find the blind man's house. And they followed her to the house, to his house or whatever, and that's the only purpose she served in the movie. So to introduce some random character like that, just so the bad guys can find the other bad guy's house, is just stupid.
It got to the point where they were all just such horrible people. I just wanted them to all fucking die and so I could go home.
Yeah, pretty much.
I guess also it would have been a lot more satisfying of an ending if she were to live and became Phoenix's new guardian, because it seemed like she was the only person with a sliver of humanity in the movie.
Yep.
I feel like that just would have been a lot more satisfying all around, but...
Well, it was even almost set up that way because she was taking Phoenix into town and spending time with her and stuff.
Yeah.
And that just got pushed to the wayside, and...
I don't care if she only had like 10 minutes of screen time. She was more well built than all of the other fucking people in the movie, I feel.
True.
So, thoughts on the movie?
Overall, the twist was weak and it happened way too early in the movie. I think it happened halfway in, to be honest, and it just wasn't done effectively. Everything in the movie seemed really forced or like pushed down our throats.
Pun intended.
The movie tried to make us side with a murdering rapist. Do I think you should see the movie? Not in theaters. No, you shouldn't see it in theaters, but watch it at home and don't pay for it in theaters.
You said you were middle of the road. I am completely off the road. I do not want you to see this movie. I mean, we saw it. We went through the troubles of it. If you want to see it, drinking will probably help.
Oh yeah, the drinking game would still be a good time. Drinking games, no matter what the movie is,
especially with friends making fun of a movie, doesn't beat that really ever. But yeah, I did not enjoy it.
Yeah.
I guess just one more side note to close things off. A lot of people didn't know this, including us, but there is an after credits scene. So if you do end up seeing the movie, watch that, and yeah, it's not going to help at all. You'll still be upset.
Yeah, I will say that I did see some positive reviews for this online. To be honest, a lot of people were saying they enjoyed it, and I mean, it's good if people do enjoy it. It's good that somebody can get something out of this movie, I guess. But in our eyes, it was a bit of a jumbled mess, to be honest. But normally, this is where we would do the Darwin Awards. But since this is a newly released movie and we try to avoid as many spoilers as possible, we will not be handing out one today. Even though it would be pretty easy to hand one out, let's be honest.
With all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Don't Breathe 2. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any other feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also, let us know in the comments if you enjoyed the movie or not.
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next week's episode, where we are going to be making a drinking game for Candyman. If you want to check out our video on the first Don't Breathe, click on the box on the top right. Or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games we made for movies released in 2021, click on the box right below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying, cheers to fears.
What do you want?
You're coming with us, kid.